Hi, everyone. Welcome to Jumpstart Justice, where in 15 minutes, we'll introduce you to important issues and take action together. I'm Ann Toback, CEO of the Workers' Circle. Thank you for being here with us. Following the program, we'll send you an email with resources to delve deeper into the issue of voter suppression and voting rights today. If you're viewing a recording of our live program, please fill out the Count Me In form and you'll receive the same information. Before we get started, please make sure you have your phone handy. And now I'm pleased to introduce to you Noelle D'Amico, our Workers' Circle Director of Social Justice, who's going to acquaint us with the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act and how it is designed and written to restore voting rights to millions of Americans. Welcome, Noelle.
Thanks, Anne. 55 years ago, the Voting Rights Act was signed into law. This monumental achievement to the civil rights movement required states with long histories of discriminatory voting laws and low turnout of Black voters to have any proposed changes to their voting procedures federally approved. The passage of the Voting Rights Act was won at great cost, and it had a tremendous impact, equalizing access to the ballot for Black Americans and other minorities, and importantly, ensuring enforcement of that right. For nearly 5 decades, the Voting Rights Act made enormous strides in combating racial discrimination in voting, and it was periodically reauthorized and even expanded by Congress to include voting discrimination against people of language minority groups. But in June of 2013, the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision called Shelby County versus Holder, gutted the Voting Rights Act by ruling that the procedure by which states were qualified for oversight was unconstitutional because it was outdated. As Chief Justice John Roberts put it, our country has changed. Before the ruling, 9 states and several other counties and townships, mostly in the South, had been subjected to this oversight requirement called pre-clearance. Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote in her dissent to Shelby that throwing out pre-clearance when it has worked and is continuing to work is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet. She argued that while Congress had determined that significant progress had been made, the scourge of discrimination was not yet extirpated. Following the Shelby County decision 7 years ago, several states passed sweeping voter suppression laws that disproportionately prevent minorities, the elderly, and youth from voting. Of course, the proponents of these new restrictions argue that they are necessary to stop voter fraud, particularly voter impersonation. But despite the hype, numerous studies collected by the Brennan Center for Justice have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that voter fraud is virtually non-existent. While in 1960, voter suppression looked like requiring a Black voter to take a literacy test, show they held property, have a qualified person attest to their moral character, or even answer impossible questions like, how many kernels of corn are in this jar? What does voter suppression look like in 2020? Well, it looks like strict voter ID laws, where a voter must present a government-issued photo in order to have access to the ballot. These serious kinds of laws, many of whom were passed immediately following the Shelby County decision. It looks like the problem with these voter ID laws is that millions of citizens in the US do not have such ID, and they are disproportionately people of color. Voter suppression in 2020 can look like unnecessary voter roll purges. In 2018, Ms. Christine Jordan, a 92-year-old Georgia voter and cousin to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., went to the polls only to find that her voter registration had been removed from the state's rolls. She had voted every year since 1968. Purging voter rolls is a less overt but tried and true method, with discriminatory purges often cloaked in an alleged need to update voting rolls. The Brennan Center for Justice found that between 2016 and 2018, 17 million people were stripped of their status as registered voters. 17 million people. And just this month, the Georgia ACLU released a report showing the state had likely incorrectly removed over 200,000 Georgia citizens from the rolls in 2019 on the grounds that they had moved from their registration address. But none of these citizens had moved. Voter suppression in 2020 looks like restricting eligibility, including for people with past convictions, reducing multilingual voting materials, and shutting down poll sites. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act responds to current conditions in voting today by restoring the full protections of the original bipartisan Voting Rights Act of 1965 that were removed by the Supreme Court in 2013. Passed by the House in 2019, this bill has been introduced in the Senate and gained increased bipartisan support since the passing of Congressman John Lewis in July. In addition to restoring the full protections of the original Voting Rights Act, the bill creates a new coverage formula that applies to all states and hinges on a finding of repeated voting rights violations in the preceding 25 years. That 25-year timeframe is a rolling period in the new bill, so that only states that have a recent record of discrimination are covered. If after 10 years states can establish a clean record, they can come out of coverage. The bill, importantly, establishes a targeted process for reviewing voting changes in jurisdictions nationwide, focused on historic measures that have had the greatest discriminatory impact, like voter ID or the reduction in multilingual voting materials. The right to vote and the ability to exercise that right is the cornerstone on which all other rights depend in our democracy. Passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act will ensure that right for all Americans.
Thank you, Noelle. I have a question for you. The report you just made is both disturbing and outrageous that such widespread voter suppression is happening right now. It's impacting millions of people and potential voters. The John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act is still a bill waiting passage by the Senate and then signature into law. What protections do voters have today in advance of the November election?
That's a great question, Anne. Right now, voters should check their registration to make absolutely sure that they are registered to vote and haven't been removed from the rolls without their knowledge. Voterly.com is one site that allows you to check your registration and to sign up to be notified if any changes to your registration are made. In terms of vote suppression that has already happened, there are numerous lawsuits to address these cases, but they're addressing voter suppression on a case-by-case basis after the fact, after voters have been denied the ability to cast their ballot. This is why it's imperative for the Senate to pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. We need to prevent these discriminatory changes to state voting law and practice before they happen.
Agreed. So we've now all heard a little bit about the importance of passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and it's time for us to take some action together. And let's all take a moment, pick up your phone, and call your senators. And so we're putting up a slide to take you through the steps. First, you'll call 202-224-3121, and that's up at the top of the slide, and say, hello, I'm calling from, and indicate your state. I would like to speak with one of my senators. And the operator will give you a choice. They'll tell you the names of both your senators. If you know who you'd like to speak, ask for them immediately, and they'll connect you. So you should also know that once you're connected, many offices right now are answering their phones immediately by machine because of COVID-19. But please don't hang up. Wait for the ability to record a message and then leave your message using some guidance from the script on the screen. And don't forget to say your name and the state you're from, and let them know that you support this act and you want it passed immediately. Once you've completed your call, we ask for you to put in the chat the name of the state and who you've just called. And if you have some time, we're going to give you 5 minutes to make this call. Feel free to make a second call and speak to another senator, to your other senator. So, and if you can't, feel free to place the call right afterwards. Do it later. It's always, all these calls are just critically important. So we're about to play some music. We're going to put ourselves on mute and make our own calls. And let's get calling. And also the number will be in the chat if you can't see it for any reason. Thank you, and let's get calling. Okay, I just called Senator Gillibrand. I see we have a call to Senator Warner from Virginia. Another call to Senator Gillibrand. We'll have another minute and then I'm going to close. But please keep calling. We've got a call to Senator Schumer, another call to Senator Gillibrand. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to bring this to a close and wrap up. I want to thank you so much for your advocacy. There's more. There's another call to Senator Gillibrand. Please keep calling. And I want to note to you all that we put a link in the chat to voterly.com. And again, this site will allow you to check your voter registration and sign up to be notified if any changes are made to your registration before the election. This is critically important. You don't want to be surprised when you go to vote in November. Following this session, you're all going to receive an email with additional resources on voting rights, the slides, and advocacy opportunities with the Workers' Circle. Next week, our Jumpstart Justice is going to be briefing you on how we can take action to protect our essential farm workers as they provide the critical work to keep our food chain up and running during this pandemic. The stakes for us all couldn't be higher. I hope you'll join us next Thursday from 2 to 2:15 Eastern Time and spread the word about Jumpstart Justice. I'm just looking, and we've got a few more calls a call to New Hampshire Senator Shaheen, another Gillibrand, and another Schumer. So keep on calling. Let's keep the pressure for voting rights there up and running. And I look forward to seeing all of you and more next week. Thank you so much. Thank you, Noel. Take good care in solidarity, and a happy new year.